Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's Archive presents China Urban Legends, the Yellow Crane Tower of Wuhan.
The first time I noticed something was off about the Yellow Crane Tower was last autumn. The person who told me this is named Fang Yuanming, a night administrative duty officer at the Yellow Crane Tower Park. When I say administrative duty, I mean he's in charge of the park's night shift coordination, 30-some cameras across the park, 6 security guards rotating patrols, and he sits in the monitoring room staring at the screens, making sure everything's normal. During the day, the Yellow Crane Tower is bustling. No need to even describe it. At the foot of Snake Mountain, one end of the Yangtze River Bridge at the Wuchang Bridgehead, this 1,000-year-old famous tower receives tens of thousands of tourists every day. During the May Day holiday, the line to go up the tower stretches from the base of Snake Mountain all the way to Simenku. The main building of the Yellow Crane Tower has 5 stories, with upturned eaves and golden tiles and red pillars. Standing on the corridor of the top floor, you can see the entire 3 towns of Wuhan at a glance: the old city of Wuchang, the riverbank of Hangzhou, the Guishan TV Tower in Hanyang, with the Yangtze River and Han River meeting at your feet, rolling eastward in grand waves. Every tourist has to take a photo from that spot, post it to their moments, usually captioning it with a lone sail's distant shadow fades into the endless blue sky. Only the Yangtze River flows beyond the horizon. But when the closing announcement blares at 6:30 p.m., the tourists recede like a tide, and the entire Snake Mountain seems to have its soul drained. The streetlights come on, but they only illuminate the steps and paths. The 60-meter-plus tower, viewed from below, stands brightly lit against the night in the landscape lighting. That's the decorative lights, not because anyone's inside. Old Fang is in his early 50s, from Shaogan, Hubei. He's been working at the Yellow Crane Tower Park for over 6 years. Before that, he was a technician at the Wuchang shipyard for 20 years. Then the shipyard restructured, he took the severance package, bounced through a few jobs, and finally got introduced to the Yellow Crane Tower Park management. His job is simple. From 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., sit in the monitoring room, answer calls, coordinate, keep records. The park's night security team has 6 people, split into 2 groups. Each group does 3 patrols. Old Fang doesn't need to walk himself, but his eyes have to be glued to those 16 surveillance feeds.
After he arrived at the Yellow Crane Tower, he heard plenty of stories from old colleagues. Old Lou from the landscaping crew, who had been at the park for 28 years and was about to retire, told him something that Fang didn't take seriously at the time. Old Lou said, "Xiao Fang, when you're on night duty at the Yellow Crane Tower, there are a few rules you need to remember. First, after midnight, don't go up the tower alone. Second, when you're on duty in the ground floor monitoring room, if you hear footsteps upstairs, pretend you didn't. Third, and most important, if you see something you shouldn't see on the surveillance screen, don't zoom in." Fang initially thought this was just old-timers scaring the newbies. He'd spent most of his life at the shipyard, seen everything, when whole sections were being aligned, 60-ton steel plates swinging overhead, wearing a hard hat walking under the keel, sweat dripping onto red-hot welding slag, sizzling. He didn't believe in that stuff. But later, he did. That was one night in September 2022. Specifically, September 16th, a Friday. Fang remembered clearly because the next day was the weekend, and the park had a nighttime event, the Yellow Crane Tower's light show, so he needed to arrange the schedule in advance. It had rained during the day, and only slowly stopped around 9 in the evening. After the rain, the air on Snake Mountain was very humid. A thin mist rose over the mountain, and the water vapor from the river climbed up the slope. The eaves of the main building appeared and disappeared in the mist, like the half-lit, half-dark brushstrokes in a splashed ink landscape painting. Fang sat in the monitoring room, brewed a cup of Enchi Yulu tea, opened his computer to organize the next day's shift schedule. He knew the layout of the monitoring room well. Entering, there was a long table, on which sat 4 monitors side by side, each split into 4 feeds, 16 total. In the corner stood an old upright air conditioner that didn't cool very well, so in the summer they had to add a floor fan blowing directly. The window faced south, directly opposite a path on the east side of the Yellow Crane Tower, and outside the window was a 50-year-old osmanthus tree. In autumn, the whole yard smelled of osmanthus.
The first patrol was at 9:30 p.m. Security guards Old Kai and Xiao Zhou set off from the duty room. Old Kai was 59 this year, had been at the Yellow Crane Tower for 15 years. A veteran. Xiao Zhou was a young guy who had joined last year, had been a military policeman for 2 years, walked fast and step-heavy. Fang watched on the monitor as they started from the south entrance, climbing the steps one by one. The Yellow Crane Tower Park is on a slope. From the main gate at the bottom to the main building, you have to climb over 100 steps. Along the way, you pass the bronze statue of Yu Fei, the pen-setting pavilion, Chui House inscribed poem wall, White Cloud Pavilion, Goose Pool. The whole walk takes nearly 20 minutes. The surveillance footage was clear. Most of the Yellow Crane Tower's night cameras were Hikvision 2-megapixel infrared PTZs with excellent night vision. As Old Kai and Xiao Zhou passed the Goose Pool, a thin layer of mist floated on the water surface, moonlight shining on the water, making it look like something was glowing at the bottom. Xiao Zhou crouched down and looked for a couple of seconds. Old Kai pulled him along, and they continued upward.
There were 4 surveillance cameras around the main building, one on each side, east, south, west, north. The east camera had the best angle, facing the main building's exterior, able to capture all the window openings from the 2nd to the 5th floor. When Fang switched to that feed, he froze. The main building of the Yellow Crane Tower has 5 stories, each with floor-to-ceiling wooden windows. During the day, they're all open for tourists to view the scenery. At night, they're closed and locked with iron locks. That afternoon, Fang had personally checked the locking of the windows. 8 wooden windows per floor, all closed, locked, confirmed one by one. But now, from the east camera feed, he saw that the leftmost window on the 5th floor, the one facing the Yangtze River Bridge, was open.
Fang lit a cigarette and zoomed in. It was indeed open. The window was pushed outward about 30 centimeters. The night wind was blowing into the gap, and a corner of the pale yellow curtain was floating out, swaying in the breeze.
He picked up the walkie-talkie and called Old Kai. Old Kai, where are you guys? Already at the base of the main building. Okay, go up to the 5th floor. The leftmost window on the top floor isn't closed properly. Help me lock it. Old Kai's voice came back from the walkie-talkie. Which one? The one facing the Yangtze River Bridge. Top floor, leftmost. Copy that. Fang stared at the surveillance feed, waiting to see Old Kai appear at the 5th floor window. About 4 minutes later, Old Kai and Xiao Zhou appeared behind the 5th floor windows. Fang could see their silhouettes moving around the room on the monitor. Old Kai walked to the leftmost window, reached out and pushed it. Then he said over the walkie-talkie, Brother Fang, this window is locked tight. Which one do you mean?
Fang said, You're right there, the leftmost one. Push it again. Old Kai pushed again. He said, Brother Fang, it's locked. Closed tight. Can't push it by hand. Fang said, Impossible. He maximized the east camera feed on his monitor. The leftmost window on the 5th floor was clearly open. The curtain was still fluttering out. He said again, Old Kai, push that window again. It's obviously open. Old Kai was silent for about 10 seconds. Then he said something that sent a chill down Fang's spine. He said, Brother Fang, I'm standing right in front of the window you're talking about. The window is closed, locked from the inside. But when you first said that window was open, I walked over to it and touched the glass. It was warm. Not the kind of warmth from being sunbaked, it was the warmth of human body temperature. Like someone had just pressed their palm against this glass. For a long time.
That night, Fang didn't send Old Kai back up to check again. He noted the window's location in the duty log, marked "Please confirm" by day shift colleagues. Then he spent the whole night replaying the east camera footage over and over. From the time the park closed at 6 p.m. until he sat down in the monitoring room, that leftmost window on the 5th floor had been closed. At 6:15 p.m., the main gate was locked, and the security did a final sweep of the building, confirming it was empty. Around 6:30 p.m., the landscape lights came on. The window was still closed. 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., no change in the footage. But at around 9:11 p.m., about 20 minutes before Old Kai and Xiao Zhou set out from the duty room, Fang saw something in the playback. No one appeared at that window on the screen. Everything around was normal. But between 9:11 and 9:13 p.m., that window went from closed to open, not pushed open by anyone, but frame by frame, as if someone was pushing it extremely slowly, taking nearly 2 minutes to go from fully closed to a 30-centimeter gap. And on the surveillance footage, there was no one inside or outside the window frame. No hand pushing from inside, no wind blowing from outside, no branch reaching over to hook the window and pull it back, nothing. The window had opened by itself. Fang watched this clip 7 or 8 times. Every single time, the result was the same. He later told me, "I'm not saying I didn't try to explain it. Maybe the camera malfunctioned, frame lag caused an illusion. Maybe the humidity after the rain was too heavy, the wooden frame swelled and deformed from moisture, suddenly popping open at some point." But he had touched old painted wooden windows. It's possible for a wooden frame to deform slightly due to weather changes, but a solid wood window that's decades old couldn't possibly, like in slow motion, take a full 2 minutes to push itself from fully closed to 30 centimeters. There was something behind that window, pushing it open to look outside.
After this incident, Fang began to take the history of the Yellow Crane Tower seriously. In his 6 years at the park, he'd seen the artifacts and display boards in the main building every day: Chui House poem, Li Bai's poem, models of the tower's successive reconstructions and timeline. But he'd never really cared about them. He thought they were just for tourists, an old tower rebuilt over 20 times, nothing special. But that self-opening window made him realize that his understanding of this tower maybe didn't even scratch the surface. He began to browse the local historical materials and legend notes about the Yellow Crane Tower during his downtime. The Yellow Crane Tower Library is inside the park, a small reference room on the 2nd floor that usually only academic researchers visit. Fang had a good relationship with Sister Zhao in the reference room, so when he had nothing to do on night shifts, he'd borrow a few books every now and then to read.
And what he found opened up a world he had never imagined.
The history of the Yellow Crane Tower can be traced back at least to the Eastern Wu state during the Three Kingdoms period. In AD 223, Sun Quan built Shako City, the earliest predecessor of modern Wuchang, and at the same time constructed a watchtower on the Snake Mountain cliff facing the river. That tower was the prototype of the Yellow Crane Tower. At that time, the Three Kingdoms situation was Sun Quan of Eastern Wu had just defeated Liu Bei's Shuhan army at the Battle of Yiling, and the entire middle Yangtze defense line needed to be redeployed. Back then, the Yellow Crane Tower wasn't called the Yellow Crane Tower. It was called Shako Tower or Snake Mountain Garrison Tower. It wasn't a building for sightseeing and pleasure. It was a military structure part of the city wall defense system, basically a watchtower, a beacon tower, a military fortification. Standing on it, every boat on the river was visible at a glance, and every move in Hanyang across the river was fully in view. Think about it. The Yellow Crane Tower's original purpose wasn't poetry and wine, wasn't welcoming guests, it was war. In its most fundamental origin, it was engraved with blood and weapons. From the Three Kingdoms to the Northern and Southern dynasties over more than 300 years at this spot on Snake Mountain, the tower was built and demolished and built at least 7 or 8 times. Wooden structures have a short lifespan along the Yangtze River wind erosion. Insect damage, fires from lightning, war flames in various conflicts. After each destruction, the next local official would rebuild it. By the Tang dynasty, The Yellow Crane Tower had fully transformed from a military fortification into a cultural landmark. Chui Hao's poem Yellow Crane Tower was written around the 8th century. The sage on Yellow Crane was gone amid clouds white. To what avail is Yellow Crane Tower left here? According to the biographies of Tang talents from the Tang dynasty, Li Bai later climbed the Yellow Crane Tower, intending to write a poem, but upon seeing Chui Hao's poem, he sighed, "The scene before my eyes cannot be described. Chui Hao's poem is above me." A poet as romantically arrogant as Li Bai, for the first time feeling inferior in front of the Yellow Crane Tower. The pen-setting pavilion commemorates this event, and it's still in the park today. But when Fang read these things, he was thinking about something else, a tower that had been garrisoned since the Three Kingdoms period, where people were born, died, fought, wrote poems, and shed tears over 1,800 years of building and destruction, undergoing more than 20 major reconstructions. Every time it was rebuilt, the old foundations weren't completely dug up. The new building was built directly on top of the old foundations. One story stacked on another. One dynasty's story buried underneath, the next dynasty covering it with its own story. The current Yellow Crane Tower was rebuilt in 1985, located about a kilometer upstream from the original site because the original spot was occupied by the Wuhan Yangtze River Bridge. But though the tower changed location, the materials and techniques followed the Qing Dynasty Tongjiera blueprints, so it's a 1985-built Qing-style tower, placed on a spot where people had stood guard since the Three Kingdoms period. When you stand on the 5th floor looking at the Yangtze River, you're at a different height but in the same space as the Tang poet Chui Hao. On the same ground as Wu Kingdom soldiers from 1,800 years ago. If their spirits still linger here, what do they think of you?
Fang began to notice more details.
One early morning in March 2023, a north wind blew through Wuchang all night. 3-meter waves rose on the river, and drivers on the bridge slowed down. The landscape lights on the Yellow Crane Tower swayed in the strong wind, making clinking metallic sounds. Fang was sitting in the monitoring room when he suddenly heard Xiao Zhou's voice from the walkie-talkie. Xiao Zhou was on the second shift that night, from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. He said, "Brother Fang, come take a look." On the south path, near the Goose Pool. Fang switched to the south camera. First, he didn't see anything. The feed showed that path, extending about 100 meters east from the Yu Fei bronze statue, lined with various ancient trees, the path lights flickering in the wind. No one was walking on it. He asked Xiao Zhou, "What do you mean?" Xiao Zhou said, "The water in the Goose Pool. It's moving." Fang said, "The wind's blowing, of course it's moving." Xiao Zhou said, "No. There's a pavilion over the Goose Pool. The wind can't reach the water surface. And it's not moving like wind does. It's like something is moving under the water." Fang zoomed in on the camera feed covering the Goose Pool. The Goose Pool is inside the east entrance of the Yellow Crane Tower Park. A small pool about 30 square meters, about 2 meters deep. In the center of the pool stands a white goose stone sculpture, commemorating the story of Wang Shiji, the calligraphy sage, raising geese and writing here. Over the pool, there is a replica ancient stone pavilion called the Goose Pavilion, which blocks most of the sky. During the day, there are a dozen koi in the pool, red koi swimming in the green water. Tourists love to take photos by the pool. But now it was past 1 a.m., and the pool surface was covered with a thin layer of fallen leaves and dead branches. On the surveillance feed, the pool water was indeed moving. There was a clear vortex in the center of the pool, about an arm's length in diameter. Not like a rapid whirlpool, but a very slow rotation, as if something was swimming slowly about half a meter below the surface, stirring a current. The pool water reflected a dull luster under the moonlight. The koi had been fished out and kept indoors for the winter, so there should be no living creatures in the pool. But that vortex lasted about 3 or 4 minutes before slowly disappearing, and the pool surface returned to calm. Fang saved this surveillance footage. The next day, he told his day shift colleagues to check the Goose Pool. He stood by the pool and looked down. The water was clear, The cobblestones and moss at the bottom could be seen clearly. The pool walls were made of regular stone blocks, very neat. Nothing unusual on the surface. But on the pool wall, about 30 centimeters below the water surface, Fang saw something indistinct, a line of engraved characters. The marks were very shallow, as if someone had scratched them with a sharp stone and then covered them with moss. He bent down to look carefully. 7 characters were carved. Beneath the pool, 10 meters deep, there are wronged souls. 3 of the characters were unclear, but pool and wronged souls could still be made out. Fang crouched by the pool for a long time. That carving was definitely not modern. The moss had filled in the scratches, and the exposed stone surface was no different in color from the surrounding native stone. At least 20 years old, maybe even older. He stuck his phone into the water to take a photo. Then he went to the reference room to look up the construction history of the Goose Pool. The Goose Pool is not an ancient feature of the Yellow Crane Tower. It's an artificial landscape built as part of the 1985 reconstruction. That means this carving appeared after 1985. But after 1985, the pool had never been drained. According to park regulations, the pool is cleaned every 5 years, and the last cleaning was in 2021. So if someone carved something at a depth of 3 zhang, about 10 meters, then the pool should be deeper than 2 meters. Fang took a bamboo pole to probe the depth. The pole went down and hit something hard at the bottom, bouncing back. Yes, it was only about 2 meters deep, but the inscription said 3 zhang 9 meters. He thought maybe he was overthinking it. Maybe 3 zhang was just an ancient exaggeration, or he misread the characters. But then he checked something else, the construction archives of the Yellow Crane Tower reconstruction. The files were very clear. Construction started in October 1984, completed in June 1985. The construction plan mentioned that when excavating the foundation for the Goose Pool, they encountered a large area of ancient building foundations. The construction team retreated about 5 meters north toward Nanchur Road to avoid the site, then backfilled a large amount of sand and gravel over the original foundation area before excavating the current Goose Pool. The backfill depth, the file said, about 4 zhang. For zhang, about 13 meters. That is to say, 13 meters below the Goose Pool's ground level lies the foundation of some building from an unknown dynasty. And the carving on the pool wall said, beneath the pool, 3 zhang. There are wronged souls. Not 2 zhang, not 5 zhang, 3 zhang. Exactly the depth between the backfill layer and the ancient foundation. The person who carved that wasn't writing randomly. He knew what was buried there.
In the summer of 2023, through a fellow townsman who was an associate professor in the history department at Wuhan University, Fang got to know a scholar who specialized in ancient Chinese mystical culture. Surname Liu, in his 60s, a retired professor from Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou, but originally from Wuhan, returning to Wuhan every summer for a stay. Professor Liu's understanding of the Yellow Crane Tower far exceeded what Fang had imagined.
Professor Liu told him, this place, the Yellow Crane Tower, has a very special status in ancient Chinese feng shui. Geographically, Snake Mountain is a branch of the Debi Mountains. The Debi Mountains run east from the border of Hunan and Hubei, and at Wuhan they split into 2. One is Tortoise Mountain in Hanyang, and the other is Snake Mountain in Wuchang. Tortoise Mountain and Snake Mountain face each other across the river, with the Yangtze flowing between them, forming the pattern called Tortoise and Snake Lock the Great River. In traditional feng shui, tortoise and snake are both spiritual creatures. The tortoise is Xuanwu, belongs to water, rules the north. The snake is the avatar of the azure dragon, belongs to wood, rules the east. 2 spiritual mountains locking the outlet of a great river. This pattern is called double dragon locking water in geomancy, an extremely rare and auspicious watermouth formation. The reason Wuhan could become the largest city in central China, flourishing for 1,000 years, is largely because this feng shui formation stabilized the fortune of the entire Middle Yangtze.
But Professor Liu emphasized here, this formation has a fatal flaw. Tortoise and snake lock the river, but they lock the Yang water, the surface water of the Yangtze. However, Snake Mountain has another water, which is Yin water. Although Snake Mountain is not high, less than 80 meters above sea level, its interior contains large areas of karst caves, limestone eroded by groundwater over hundreds of millions of years, forming numerous caves and underground rivers within the mountain. The Yellow Crane Tower is built directly above the main karst cave system on the river-facing side of Snake Mountain. That underground river doesn't have an official name in local water conservancy records. Locals call it Snake Intestine River. It runs through the belly of Snake Mountain and empties into the Yangtze about 30 meters below the mountain's base. The locals have passed down a saying for generations: there's something in the Snake Intestine River. No one can say exactly what that means. But after hearing Professor Lu's words, Fang's heart skipped a beat. He remembered what old Lu had told him. Third, and most important, if you see something you shouldn't see on the surveillance screen, don't zoom in. He now understood what old Lu meant by something you shouldn't see.
From the summer of 2023 onward, Fang's attitude toward the Yellow Crane Tower underwent a fundamental change. Before, when he worked night shifts, he'd close the monitoring room door, start playing a crosstalk show or an audiobook, brew a cup of tea, and time passed quickly. But starting from that self-opening window, from that blurred line of characters on the pool wall, he no longer treated the Yellow Crane Tower's nights as an ordinary shift. He began to connect those scattered, seemingly unrelated anomalies, like a jigsaw puzzle, piecing them together one by one. One early morning in August 2023, Wuhan experienced a rare thunderstorm. The heavy rain lasted nearly 3 hours, with the deepest waterlogging in Wuchang exceeding half a meter. Although the Yellow Crane Tower's drainage system had been upgraded multiple times, some water still seeped out from the stone cracks beside the Goose Pool after the heavy rain. In the monitoring room, Fang received a notice from the flood control headquarters requiring all cultural relic protection units to inspect the main structures for leaks after the rain. He put on a raincoat and walked out of the monitoring room at 4:30 a.m., using a flashlight to inspect the main building.
The rain had mostly stopped, only a few scattered drops remaining. White mist rose over the river, so thick that the outline of the bridge was barely visible. The stone steps on Snake Mountain had been washed clean by the rain, and moonlight shone on the wet steps, reflecting a silvery white cold light. Fang climbed the steps one by one, flashlight in hand. He noticed a detail: with each step he took, the reflected light on the steps behind him would briefly have a darker shadow, as if someone was following him closely, stepping almost synchronously in the places he'd stepped, leaving a darker mark next to his wet footprint. He stopped and looked back 2 or 3 times, nothing behind him. But when he walked, that shadow was still there.
When he later described this to me, he said, "I could feel it. It wasn't psychological. There really was something following me. Not a living person. It didn't have any malice. It was like an original inhabitant who had always lived there, saw a stranger entering its territory in the middle of the night, and was uneasy, following to see what this person was doing. Its walking habit was very peculiar. The spacing between its steps was exactly the same as mine, and the weight of each step was almost identical. It was like my shadow was imitating my walking, but when I stopped, it didn't stop. It took another half-step forward before stopping. That half-step lag was a copy that no person could achieve, because a shadow doesn't walk. But when something is following behind you, mimicking you, it's always half a beat behind." In April 2024, the main building of the Yellow Crane Tower underwent a routine structural inspection. This is a requirement of the Cultural Relics Department. Every 3 years, check the wooden structure for insect damage, rot, or structural problems. The inspection was scheduled after the park closed for the night. 3 people from a third-party inspection company came, bringing laser rangefinders, crack gauges, rebound hammers, and climbing equipment. Fang was responsible for accompanying them and recording.
During the first 3 hours of inspection, everything was normal. The wooden beams, pillars, brackets, doors, and windows on floors 1 through 4 all fell within safe parameters. But on the 5th floor, the inspectors found something abnormal. A wooden floorboard in the center of the 5th floor. During the load-bearing test, the instrument showed abnormal rebound in the structural layer beneath that plank. In layman's terms, there was a cavity under the floor. The inspector tapped on that floorboard, and the sound was clearly hollower than the solid area around it. They lifted the floorboard. Underneath was a hidden compartment about 30 centimeters square. Not deep, about 20 centimeters. Inside the compartment was an object, a small bundle wrapped in oil paper. The oil paper had yellowed and become brittle, with some edges already cracked. The inspectors carefully removed it with tools, placed it on a plastic tray, and handed it to Fang. Fang opened the oil paper. Inside was a bronze mirror. The bronze mirror wasn't large, about 10 centimeters in diameter, and its surface was completely covered in a layer of blue-green patina. On the back of the mirror, there was an inscription faintly recognizable as a lotus flower and a crane. The crane's posture was very peculiar, not spreading its wings, not taking off, but with its head lowered and neck bent as if it was looking at something, or mourning something.
Beneath the bronze mirror was a piece of yellowed chien paper, on which neat small regular script wrote one line. This mirror suppresses the tower. Do not move. If moved, great calamity will follow. The characters were written very well, strokes steady and forceful, showing that the writer had practiced. Below there was no signature, no date. But the paper material, bamboo paper, later identified by someone Fang knew, was a common handmade bamboo paper from the late Qing dynasty in Hubei. That means this bronze mirror and this note were hidden in the hidden compartment of the 5th floor at least as early as the late Qing dynasty, maybe even earlier. When the Yellow Crane Tower was rebuilt in 1985, all the floorboards were newly laid. If this hidden compartment was made during the reconstruction, then the person who hid it must have been a worker or designer from that time. But here's the problem. The 1985 reconstruction followed the blueprints from the 7th year of the Tongji reign of the Qing dynasty, which is 1868. That means the 5th floor layout matched the 1868 Yellow Crane Tower. If the hidden compartment's location existed on the 1868 blueprints, then this mirror was already placed there in 1868, over 150 years ago, possibly even earlier. Later, Fang used his connections to ask a friend who worked at the Wuhan Museum. After looking at the photos, his friend's expression turned unpleasant. He said the decorative style of this bronze mirror was very unique. The combination of a lotus and a crane with its neck bent isn't an ordinary decorative pattern. It's a Taoist soul-suppressing talisman. The lotus is a ritual tool for saving the souls of the dead, and the crane is a spiritual bird that guides souls to heaven. A crane with its neck bent indicates that the psychological expectation is the souls below are unwilling to leave the human world. It's lowering its head in regret, mourning something it failed to accomplish. This is not an ordinary bronze mirror. It's a ritual object for salvation and soul suppression. Someone hid it under the floorboard of the 5th floor of the Yellow Crane Tower, not for decoration, not for commemoration, but to suppress something, to keep it from coming out from under the floor. Fang said that after hearing what his museum friend said, he felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water down his back. That bronze mirror was found under the floorboard in the center of the 5th floor. The center of the 5th floor, directly above the main vein of Snake Mountain. Directly above the Snake Intestine River underground river. Directly above the most core feng shui position of the 3 towns of Wuhan. Someone had buried a Taoist soul-suppressing bronze mirror at that spot. Not casually placed, carefully wrapped in oil paper, and attached a note warning later generations, do not move. That location was not chosen at random. The 5th floor is the highest observation level of the entire Yellow Crane Tower. Standing there, you can see in all 4 directions. In traditional architecture, that is the heavenly heart position of the entire building, equivalent to a building's vital point. But what unsettled him even more was another problem. The inspection company discovered this bronze mirror in April 2024. According to cultural relic management regulations, the mirror was handed over to the Wuhan Museum for further appraisal and storage. In other words, the mirror was no longer in its original position. Fang remembered the words on the note. This mirror suppresses the tower. Do not move. If moved, great calamity will follow. He wasn't sure what great calamity meant. But between May and September 2024, abnormal noises of unknown origin occurred 3 times on the 5th floor of the main building of the Yellow Crane Tower, all between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Security went up to check. The building was empty, doors and windows locked, nothing abnormal. But these noises were recorded by the audio collection system. Not footsteps, more like someone pounding a wooden wall with fists, muffled, very slow rhythm. Pound, pause 3 or 4 seconds, pound again, lasting a minute or 2 before stopping. Fang sent the recordings to several friends to listen. No one could identify the sound. Some said it might be the sound of wood expanding and contracting at night due to temperature changes, but it wasn't cold in Wuhan in May, so thermal expansion didn't make sense. Others said it might be rats or badgers moving inside the walls, but the main building of the Yellow Crane Tower is a 5A rated scenic spot. Pest and rodent control is very thorough. It's hard to even find a cockroach in the main building.
Fang had a guess in his mind, but he didn't say it out loud. He said, I just think someone is looking for something. Has been looking for a long time. It searched for hundreds of years, and finally, on that day, with the help of our inspection team, it found that hidden compartment. But it probably never expected that we moved away its defensive bronze mirror. It might be angry.
In July 2024, Wuhan entered the plum rain season. The Yangtze River water level rose to the highest point since summer began, and half of Hangzhou's riverbank park was flooded. On July 12, the Geological Monitoring System at the Yellow Crane Tower issued an alert on the north side of Snake Mountain. Near the foundation of the main building, the groundwater level monitoring data showed an abnormal short-term fluctuation. The fluctuation wasn't large, about a 12-centimeter rise before returning to normal. But the duration was very short, less than 2 hours overall. This fluctuation pattern was completely different from the normal daily variation curve of groundwater levels. Normal changes are slow, steady, gentle fluctuations affected by transpiration and tidal influences. But this day's data showed a sharp spike and a sharp drop, as if something had been activated at that moment, briefly affecting the groundwater pressure, then sinking back down. In Fang's patrol log, there was a detail he recorded on a separate page. He wrote, on that day, at about 2 a.m., abnormal water stains were found on the steps about 20 meters east of the main building. They weren't caused by rain because that spot was sheltered by eaves. The water stains were irregularly banded, extending from the top of the steps all the way down, then disappearing into the stone path toward the Goose Pool. The water stains weren't clear, slightly turbid, as if containing sediment. Fang used a tissue to collect a sample and smelled it. He said he detected a faint rusty smell, not the rust of iron, but the rusty smell of dried blood. Not the smell of fresh blood, but blood that had dried for decades, seeped into the ground, and then churned up by rain.
He also told this detail to Professor Liu. Professor Liu was silent on the phone for a long time. Then he said something that Fang would never forget.
Professor Liu said, have you heard of the concept of lost ground? In traditional Chinese geography, some places, due to historical leftover problems, are marked as lost ground in feng shui, meaning the owner of this land is no longer alive, but the memory of the land remains. What does land memory include? Every spill of blood, every burning, every hastily buried corpse. When the Yellow Crane Tower was rebuilt in 1985, the workers digging the foundation said they unearthed large amounts of ancient tiles and broken porcelain, as well as scattered human bones. They didn't make a fuss at the time, just buried them all on the riverbank according to regulations. But you should know, what's buried beneath the Yellow Crane Tower is not just Tang Dynasty tiles and Song Dynasty porcelain. During the Taiping Rebellion in 1854, the Taiping Army and the Qing Army fought a brutal urban battle in Wuchang. The Taiping occupied Wuchang for nearly a year, and the Qing Army mobilized nearly 100,000 troops from the Hunan Army and the Green Standard Army to counterattack. After that battle, the dead soldiers and civilians inside and outside Wuchang City numbered nearly 50,000. The Snake Mountain area, where the Yellow Crane Tower sits, was the high ground of the city defenses, and the bodies of both sides piled up several layers deep. That year, the temperature in Wuhan was very high, and the bodies rotted quickly under the summer sun. Residents of several streets near the Yellow Crane Tower caught a plague that year. The infected suffered vomiting and diarrhea, high fever, black pustules all over their bodies, and died within 3 to 5 days. There was a saying at the time, the crows on Snake Mountain ate so much human flesh that their eyes turned red. They perched on the Yellow Crane Tower's flying eaves, their wings stained with blood. When you push open that window that opens by itself at night, every gust of wind that blows and carries the dust of that frozen age. After hearing this, Fang didn't reply. He later told me, "At that moment, I had a very strange feeling, not fear, but a kind of immense sadness that transcended time and individuals." He said that at that moment, he truly understood why old Lu had worked at the Yellow Crane Tower for 28 years, saying every year he was going to retire, but then voluntarily renewing his contract every year. Because those things, those pressed under Snake Mountain, buried under the Goose Pool, built into the city walls. What they needed wasn't some salvation ritual, wasn't some soul-suppressing bronze mirror. What they needed was just for someone to be there, in an empty tower at 2 in the morning, sitting silently. When someone is there, they stay quiet.
In October 2024, Fang Yuanming officially transferred to the day shift. He had been working at the Yellow Crane Tower Park for nearly 7 years. He said he didn't transfer because he was scared, just getting older, couldn't handle night shifts anymore. That was true. A man in his 50s, continuous night shifts really take a toll. But I knew there was another reason he didn't mention. After that bronze mirror was removed, he felt that the air pressure in the tower had changed. Not a change in temperature, not a change in humidity, but a change in a field that he couldn't describe in words. Like when you're alone in a room, nothing's wrong at first, but suddenly you feel that there's another pair of eyes in the room watching you. You turn around, the room is empty. But after you sit down, that feeling of being watched doesn't disappear, it gets stronger.
On his last night shift before transferring to days, he did one thing. He climbed the Yellow Crane Tower alone. This was the first time in over 6 years of guarding the tower that he had gone up to the 5th floor alone in the dead of night. He didn't turn on the lights. He placed his flashlight on the floor, beam pointing up, casting a dim, swaying patch of light among the 5th floor wooden beams. He walked over to where the bronze mirror had been found. The floorboard had been replaced and looked seamless, but Fang crouched down. He pressed his palm flat against that wooden plank. He said that plank was slightly warm, different from the other planks around it, about 1 or 2 degrees warmer. As if someone had just been sitting here, sitting for a long time, their bottom and thighs warming the floor.
He said one sentence to that floorboard, "I don't know who you are. But your mirror is not in my hands now. I can't put it back for you. If you want to find it, go find it yourself. But don't harm anyone." After he said that, he stood up, turned off the flashlight, and walked down the stairs step by step. When he walked out of the main building's gate, he looked back. The leftmost window on the 5th floor, the one facing the Yangtze River bridge, was open again. The curtain was silently fluttering in the night. That afternoon, when Fang finished telling me these things, we were having lunch in a small restaurant in Hobu Alley, Wuchang. Hobu Alley is less than a 10-minute walk from the Yellow Crane Tower, Wuchang's most famous food street. The alley was packed with people, hot dry noodles, 3 fresh bean curd, paste soup rice noodles, glutinous rice wrapped around fried dough sticks, duck necks, long queues everywhere. Fang had just gotten off his day shift, wearing a gray jacket, his hair a bit messy, looking like an ordinary middle-aged Wuhan man. He was eating a bowl of hot dry noodles while telling me all this, his tone very flat, like he was telling a story that happened to someone else. I asked him, "Did you ever mention that bronze mirror to anyone else?" He said yes. He told Professor Liu. Professor Liu said one thing: the outlet of the Snake Intestine River underground stream is about 35 meters directly below the main building of the Yellow Crane Tower. Groundwater flows. The spot where that bronze mirror was placed was exactly at the pulse node of the upper layer of the underground river. Its function wasn't some great mystical power, it was just a stone pressing down. Like putting a wooden board over a steaming well, when you take the lid off, the steam comes out. Not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely not a good thing.
I asked him again, "Do you still go to the Yellow Crane Tower at night now?" He smiled and said, "Occasionally. During the day, I take my kid. The Yellow Crane Tower is still very lively during the day. My kid likes running around under the white pagoda." He paused, then added, "When you go during the day, it's just a tower. A very old, very beautiful tower with 1,800 years of history. But if you go after the lights are off and the locks are on, you'll know it's not just a building. You stand at the 5th floor window looking out. The Yangtze flows below. You can hear the sound of the river even at over 100 meters up. When the wind blows in through the window, that sound, the Tang people, Song people, Ming people, Qing people, the people fighting the Battle of Wuhan in 1938, they all stood at the same spot and listened to the same wind." He put down his chopsticks and said, "Old Yang, have you ever thought? A tower that's been garrisoned since the 3 kingdoms. How many generations of people's births, deaths, joys and sorrows has it seen? Every soldier who stood guard there, every poet who inscribed a poem, every ordinary person who took refuge, part of them stays here. Not in the form of ghosts. It's like how the walls of an old house where you've lived for many years are soaked with your scent. The Yellow Crane Tower's 63 wooden pillars and 37,000 glazed tiles. They're soaked with too many people's smells. So much that it's overflowing. So much that on certain nights, it will open a window by itself. In the spring of 2025, I passed through Wuhan and made a special trip to the Yellow Crane Tower again. It was drizzling that day, just after Qingming Festival, and there weren't too many tourists. I bought a ticket, entered from the south gate, and climbed the wet steps one by one. Passing the bronze statue of Yufei, a group of middle school students were taking photos on the steps, the teacher in charge counting heads. Passing the pen-setting pavilion, an elderly couple was sheltering from the rain in the pavilion, the old lady holding up her phone to take a selfie with her husband. Passing the Goose Pool, a few fallen petals floated on the water, light pink, as if they had drifted down from cherry blossom trees on the mountain. Koi swam back and forth, their red tails waving in the dark green water, occasionally kicking up a splash. I didn't linger by the Goose Pool. I went straight up the main building. When I climbed to the 5th floor, I walked to the leftmost window facing the Yangtze River bridge. The window was open daytime, normal ventilation. I stood at the window and looked out. The Yangtze rolled by below, boats like leaves drifting slowly. On the Hankow riverbank, someone was flying a kite. The Guishan TV tower stood straight on the opposite shore. Everything was so normal, so peaceful, so suitable for posting a friend moment with the caption vividly outlined. The Hanyang trees stand bright. Luxuriantly grows the full-blown grass on Parrot Islet. But as I stood there, I did one thing. I pressed the palm of my right hand against the wooden window frame. The surface was painted chestnut, smooth and slightly cool. Not the warmth that Fang had mentioned, just the temperature of an ordinary piece of old wood. But on that window frame I felt a very shallow indentation. You couldn't feel it at all if you weren't paying attention. a horizontal groove about 2 fingers wide. As if in the past decades, countless hands had repeatedly grabbed the same spot on the frame in the same posture. Not fingerprints left behind, not an artificial aging treatment. It was the shape of time left on wood by countless hands rubbing the same spot over and over. I withdrew my hand and stood at the window for a while. The wind blew in, carrying the moist breath of the Yangtze surface and a faint earthy smell. I was thinking, at the top of this tower, at the same window over 1,800 years, how many people have stood here? Those who once leaned on this window frame, centuries of the Wu Kingdom, poets of the Great Tang, defending generals of the Southern Song, revolutionaries of the late Qing, nationalist soldiers in 1938 who used binoculars to watch for Japanese aircraft during the Battle of Wuhan, Wuhan citizens who crowded at the window to watch the bridge opening in 1957, the first tourists after the 1985 reconstruction. What did each of them see when they stood at this window? The Wu sentry saw enemy warships on the north bank. The Tang poet saw the vanishing sail of a departing friend. The Southern Song general saw the banners of the Yuan army. The 1938 soldier saw bombers with the rising sun flag. The 1985 tourist saw the newly completed Yangtze River Bridge and a brand new city skyline. Everyone saw something different, but all of them pressed their palms against this piece of wood. And now it was my turn.
I touched that groove again. Then I turned and walked down the stairs.
When I walked out of the yellow crane tower gate, I looked back. The setting sun slanted from the west side of Snake Mountain, gilding the entire tower's outline in gold. The shadows of the flying eaves and upturned corners stretched long on the ground. The wind made the open window move, a very small movement, about a centimeter or two. Then it returned to its original position. No one stood at that window. The window frame was empty. But I couldn't tell if it was just my imagination. I felt a gust of wind that didn't come from the river, but from inside the tower. Very light, very cool, with a faint smell of old wood and dust. Like an evening 1,800 years ago, in the same sunset, a Wu Kingdom sentry had finished his 3-hour watch, and before descending the watchtower, let out a long sigh.
That sigh had waited nearly 2,000 years, and finally, on that evening, it was blown out with the river wind, landing on the face of a passing stranger. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day.